Hello, Internet! I'm Alec the Purple Hair Doofus, and welcome to Buddy Reads, where I read a small selection of a book and review it for you. Today we are covering chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 of part 2 of Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I hope you've read up to that point yourself because I do not want to ruin anything for you. In this section, Poirot interviews 4 more suspects. Actually 5. He interviews 5 more subjects. And it's at this point in the book where I'm starting to get a little worried for the movie because so far we've had some great scenes in the first part. But the second part right now, it's basically interview after interview after interview, and I'm wondering how they're going to keep that interesting during the movie. But let's talk about the actual interviews. The first person that they interview is the Swedish lady who is the maid of Princess... because I don't know how to say her name. She comes in, Poirot asks her name, her address, where she's going. The same questions that he's asked every other suspect so far. We get to learn a little bit more about her, which is that she is a trained nurse. We also learn that last night, before she got to her sleeping car, she accidentally went into Ratchet's sleeping car. And he was sitting there reading a book, but he also said something somewhat sexually slurish to her. Well, it made the other woman go, "Oh my god, I can't believe he said that." Well, he was a kidnapping murderer, so yeah, he's gonna do something to disturb someone else. Of course. And she says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." She leaves his room and goes to hers. We also find out that she is bunking with an English woman. Poirot then asks her about her dressing gown, her nightgown. And she says, "Oh, I believe it was yellow." Whatever it was a different color than the dressing gown that the conductor saw of the woman who was walking down the hall after the murder. So that kind of ruled her out. Poirot then writes a bunch of notes down, and the doctor kind of looks over at him and says, "What are you writing?" And Poirot says, "I'm writing down everything that has happened in chronological order." And the doctor's like, "Oh, that's probably a really good idea." He says, "Let me take a look at it." And he looks over the notes, and we read the notes. And he says, "Oh, I see you have everything that we've heard so far." And Poirot says, "You don't see anything odd about those notes? Or anything odd about any of that timing?" And he says, "No." And I'm looking at I read over the notes like 3 times, and I'm like, I don't see anything odd either. But then again, I'm not the world's greatest detective, so that's probably a good thing. And then the other guy, I believe it was the other conductor, points a finger at the Italian. And he's like, "I think it was the Italian that did it. I think that big fat man killed him. We should question him next." And Poirot's like, no. We're gonna question someone else. And they call in Princess. The princess comes in, and she is very "Oh, I am a princess. I am better than this. I should not have to do this." They even offered to go to her. And she's like, no, I'll come to you, lowly people. But before she goes in, the conductor comes in because he's the one that has to go retrieve the princess. And the conductor actually gets questioned by Poirot. And he actually gets accused by Poirot. And the conductor's like, "No, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. That button, I don't know how it got there. I swear." And Poirot's like, "Well, the only logical step is that you were in the room, and that's how the button got in there. But how did it get on top of her magazine?" He's like, "I don't know. I swear it wasn't me. I didn't do it. I didn't kill anyone." The conductor eventually leaves, and then the other conductor guy goes, "I still think it was that nasty Italian, and I still think that he should be the next one to be on the chopping block." And Poirot's like, "No." I've already said no. Then the princess finally comes in, and she recounts what happened to her last night, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. Pretty much the same thing as everyone else. "After dinner, I went to my sleeping car, I went to bed." They're like, "Did you hear anything?" He's like, "No, I took a sleeping pill and I went to sleep." And that's another thing I forgot to mention. A lot of these suspects so far, even the victim, everyone on this train is on sleeping pills or pain pills of some kind, and it's just kind of like, I'm on a train full of insomniacs. And then Poirot asks her about the Armstrong case, and she says, "Of course I knew the Armstrongs. I was their godmother." And then it's like, "Aha! You have motive now! Ha 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 ha!" He asks her about her nightgown, and she said, "No, I was wearing a different color." And it's just like, okay. And then she says, "Oh, but Mr. Poirot, you look oddly familiar to me. Do we know each other? Do you know me?" And it's like, "No." And it's just like, "Oh, I swear I know you from somewhere. I'll get back to you on that one." And she walks out the door. Then they decide to interview the Count and his wife. So 6 suspects have been interviewed in this section, and the Count comes in without his wife, and he's like, "You don't need to see my wife. I'll answer all of her questions for you." And Perot's like, we'll still need to see her as a formality. They ask him the same questions. What's your name? Where are you from? And actually, when they ask him his name, they have him write on a piece of paper. And I think they might have had the other suspects write on the piece of paper too, and I might have just glossed over it, because I think what's happening there is Perot is doing a hand check, because when they inspected the body, the doctor said that it's most likely done by someone who is left-handed. So when they're doing the writing, he's checking to see who is left-handed. But Agatha Christie never tells us what hands these people are writing with, so we don't know. The only specific thing about the Count that we know is that he didn't actually know about the Armstrong case. And the Countess comes in and she's very meek, but because it's a wife in the 30s, she doesn't really fight against the Count's recounting. She just says, I went to my room and I went to sleep, and my dressing gown is a different color, so there. They let her go after she signs her name, and again, hand check. And then they call in the Colonel, or both not. Weird that I can say his name well, but no one else. And I'm probably still pronouncing that wrong, but, they call him in. They recount his evening, but before they even start talking about the details of his evening, Perot asks him about his relationship with Mary. Whew! It's just like, nosy bastard. You don't need to know that. But he says, yes, we're good friends, la-da-da-da-da. The Colonel actually confirms the secretary's story of being, in conversations with each other all night long. Going off the train for a moment and coming back and not knowing if they actually put the bar back up on the entrance and not knowing if they did the right thing or not. And then Perot asks him, do you smoke a pipe? And the Colonel's like, well, yes, I do. And this whole time I thought that Perot was actually asking for someone to he was trying to find someone to smoke a pipe so that he could borrow some smoke for himself, but that wasn't the case. Turns out when he looked in the murder scene, he found pipe cleaners. The victim, Ratchet, only smoked cigars and cigarettes so that he would have no reason to have a pipe cleaner. Before the Colonel leaves, he talks about how when he heard the screams, he looked out his door and he looked to the room to the left of him, or to the right of him. He looked to the room right next to him, and there was a guy that had his head out the door who quickly slammed it shut as soon as he noticed that he was being spotted. So we have no idea who that was. I can always look back on the map and find out, but I'm too lazy right now. I'll find out when I read the next section. And then he leaves. That's when Perot starts talking about the fact that the Colonel smokes a pipe. And that's pretty much where the section ends for today. Like I said before, I'm getting a little worried about the movie itself, because here we are in the meat of the story, in the meat of the book, and we're just having interview after interview after interview, and I'm wondering how they're going to make that interesting in the movie, because if it's just interview after interview after interview, that's a pretty boring movie. We will see. They're going to have to change a lot, I think, in order to make it an interesting movie. While this is a very fantastic and interesting read, I'm curious to see how they will portray it in the film. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and click that subscribe button. If you like this video specifically, go ahead and click that like button. And go ahead and leave a comment letting me know what was the last time that you read a book that was interesting, but you knew it was only interesting in that book form, and it wouldn't be interesting in a movie form. I've been Alec the Purple-Haired Doofus. This has been Buddy Reads, reminding you to watch your Pajamaritas, and I will see you all in the next section of Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Toodles!